Chino, OG Chino, Los Angeles, California.
For the dime moves and the lokes, for the 6-4s on spokes, for the OGs that did a dime, came back around on parole, for the homegirls with the scrap game, lil' homies that gang bang, from Pelican Bay to YA, rearrange your mind frame. Yeah, I know what you been through, shit you had to go tend to. Your mama gave birth on the turf, I know them killers you kin to. This for the lost generation, broke as hell, mad and impatient. But if you know your history, you can't have a strong foundation, baby. Video, you know this is for sure.
I was born in Korea, 1967, and raised in Bogota, Colombia. My family moved to Colombia when I was about 2 years old. So about 69, I moved to Colombia, and that's where I was raised. Then I came to LA in 1977.
What area did you land in when you came to LA?
First stop was Carson. Carson. I went to Catskill Elementary School. I couldn't speak any Korean, and there was no Koreans in Carson. So I hung with the Mexican cats. But in those days, the Mexican neighborhood in Carson was working class. Nobody was really gangbanging, wasn't doing anything, And then Scottsdale was right there, which was like where all the black kids used to live. Yeah.
So you grew up with blacks and Chicanos?
Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, I didn't stay in Carson for too long, but I think that kind of like me being brand new to America. I think that's where I found my comfort, hanging out with Latinos and blacks. So when we moved to Koreatown in '78, we came to Koreatown, and I got put in ESL, because I couldn't speak English well. So it's like my ESL class was like Koreans and Latinos, and the Koreans kind of immediately hated on me. They were like, "Man, this dude's weird. He can't speak Korean. He only speaks Spanish." But the Mexican kids were like, "Hey, why not let him play with us?" You know what I mean? So I automatically just ended up, hanging out with the Mexican kids.
I want to step back a little bit.
Yeah.
So you're originally from Korea.
Yeah.
And you guys land in Colombia.
Yeah.
What's that about?
My pops, and that's what's interesting about my story is that, my pops was a diplomat. So, but Korea was like a dirt poor country at the time. So he got sent to Colombia with like almost nothing. So we lived really poor. I mean, we had like fucking rats running under our beds and all that shit for the first few years. And then once Korea started progressing and they started funneling more money into the Korean embassy where my father was working, then we were able to live like a pretty prestigious life, life in Colombia. Like my friends were like the ambassadors' kids and shit like that. But then, but we were the only Koreans in Colombia at the time, us and a few other families. So I'm like really used to being made fun of from like, from like the time I can remember. So that was normal to me, man. I always felt like the different dude, you know what I mean? Like, but I never felt like out of place. I actually liked being the different dude and standing out. So and I think when I came to LA, our life just flipped around, and you know what I mean. We're no longer living in a nice house, and we're like kind of like in the hood. Like Koreatown in that era was the hood. You know what I mean?
So when you was in Colombia, did you pick up Spanish?
Yeah, I mean that's like almost my first language. I speak baby Korean and Spanish.
So what years were you in Colombia?
1969 to 77, 78.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. So when you landed in LA, you knew Spanish.
Yeah, I was fluent in Spanish.
You
Yeah.
slid right in with the Chicanos.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then that led to like growing up with the whole cholo culture. You know what I'm saying? Like without really realizing it. Like I never said, "Oh, I'm gonna join a gang. You know what I mean? But that was LA at that time. You know, like late 70s. LA at the time was all about, you know, gangs and whatever neighborhood you're from, you represented. You know what I'm saying? Like that.
So what street did you guys land on in Koreatown?
In Koreatown on Wilton Place and 9th Street. And Wilton Place and 9th Street really wasn't a particular gang neighborhood, but it was almost like where everybody kind of, you know what I mean, kind of clashed. You know, there was a lot of Clanton, because Clanton was right there on Pico, Harvard. There was a lot of 18th Street, that was like Queen Anne Park. There was a lot of just random little gangs. Everybody was, you know, gangs were cool back then. You know, and then there was the first Korean gang in Koreatown, which is the Korean Killers. You know, and that was 77. They used to write K77K. You know?
So when you landed in LA, Koreatown, you're about, what, 10, 11 years old?
Yeah,
So
10 years old.
What schools were you
I
doing?
started at Wilton Place Elementary. Yeah, that's where I started in Koreatown.
And what middle school?
John Burroughs, and then 8th grade I got kicked out for stealing a bike, and ended up at Bancroft. So yeah, I got to see some of the Hollywood side. You know what I mean? At that
When did you
age.
become aware of gangs?
Man, I would say within a year after landing in the States, man. Like, once I started going, I think in Carson, I wasn't aware of gangs. So, I know my friends wasn't gangbanging back then. And then I went to visit Carson a few years later, and all the homies were like, Carson 13, and wow, I was like, okay. But I think I became aware here in Koreatown. You know, my big brother, I was in elementary school, and my brother was going to John Burroughs, my older brother, and then he would tell me, yeah, there's cholos on the back of the bus, they smoke weed, and I was like, okay, I didn't really know what he was talking about, but it took maybe within a year, man, that I realized I was running around with them dudes, and I started smoking weed like within a year, you know what I mean?
Is this at John Burroughs or
Yeah.
at Bancroft?
No, at John Burroughs, yeah.
What gangs?
When I went to Bancroft, I was already kind of trying to rep my hood, you know what I mean? When like I ran with 18th Street just because that's the neighborhood I was in, and I had an older homie named Wolf. He's black, he was black, and they called him Wolf, and he was from 18th Street, and he was a few years older than me. He went to school with my sister, and he really liked my sister, so he was always like, hey, little homie, you know, always treating me, and I think he's one of the dudes that kind of influenced me into like wanting to be part of that. You know what I mean? But like I said, I was a little kid, didn't even know what I was getting into.
So the area that you moved into Koreatown, that ended up being 18th Street territory?
Mostly, like I said, it was like a mesh of a lot of gangs. There was a lot of but I wouldn't say it was 18th Street like dominant. You know, there was a lot of Playboys, PBS. They were like on Pico and Normandy. And you had Clanton just a few blocks away. You had Harpys just like in the 20s, you know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of gangs, man, a lot of gangs, yeah.
So Wolf pulled you into the 18th Street.
Well, I looked up to Wolf because, you know, I thought he was cool. Used to ride around like all khaki down and on a cruiser bike, and he was always painting 18 on the wall, you know what I mean? So I used to look up to him. So yeah, he was like my first older dude that I was like, oh, yeah, he's fucking cool. You know what I mean?
Where
Yeah.
did Wolf live at?
Wolf lived in the neighborhood. I want to say near Queen Anne Park. Yeah, his name is Kenny Washington. You know, yeah.
So what 18th Street clique was that?
Queen Anne Park.
Queen
Yeah,
Anne Park?
yeah. There was a Queen Anne Park Malditos clique. Yeah, the clique was Malditos, but you know, Malditos was you know, the original Malditos were like McManus Park, West Adams. You know, Smiley and Hauser. And then there was the Queen Anne Park Malditos. And I was a little kid, so I didn't really know too much back then, but I know they were a little bit detached. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't really hang out with each other too much, but, you know, they knew about each other. But, yeah, I knew a couple of homies from, like, the McManus Park area when I was a kid, and they used to tell me, nah, we don't know, you know, we don't know your homeboys, but cool, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, 18 was a big gang. It was a big gang.
Also, those Rimpal Boulevard gangsters weren't out at the time?
Nah.
The ones in Schoolyard Hood?
Nah, I don't remember Rimpal. Nah, I don't remember that clique, man. Like, back then it was the Malditos, Tiny Locos, Tiny Winos. Tiny Winos were like near Koreatown, like around Western. There was the Rancho Park boys, that's, and then there were the 7th and Broadway gangsters in downtown. But this was like early, relatively early days, I think.
So look, you're coming home with the whole cholo gear on.
Oh,
What's mom and dad saying?
well, that's the problem. Mom and dad wasn't here. So back then, it's like Korean parents would send their kids to America to get an education. So our parents sent us here from Colombia, and they thought America's a great place. It's safe, free education, and they thought it was all good. But no, like within a year, like I said, I was already running with the wrong crowd and smoking weed within a year. So my parents had no awareness of what's going on here. Now my oldest sister, Kay, who was about 16, 17 at the time, she spoke Korean fluently because she's older, and so she ran with like the Korean gang, and she ended up almost, I don't know if she started it, but like the girl Korean killers is like my sister and her homegirls. So our apartment, without our parents, became like a hangout for like the Korean gangsters in Koreatown in 77, 78. So I got really used to it, and they used to fuck with me like, hey, why is your little brother hang out with the Mexicans? You know what I mean? And I used to dress like a Mexican, but they did too. It was like the cholo style. It was like, if you're in a gang, you're gonna dress like a cholo in some way. You know what I'm saying?
So were they trying to pull you back into the Korean fold?
Nah. I think my sister probably said, nah, leave my brother alone. You know what I mean? Like my sister kept me out of the shit, and my sister used to tell me, I know you hang out with them 18th Street dudes or whatever, but I was I was a little kid, man,
So this is like the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, right?
This is late 70s. Late 70s. And I think by early 80s, I thought I was a gangster, you know what I mean? By like 8th, 9th grade, then I would be all khaki down and going to school with khakis and house shoes on,
so look,
and all
this
this
is Los
stuff.
Angeles, early 80s.
Yeah.
You're a Korean in a Mexican gang.
Yeah.
Was that an issue? With
Nah, never, man.
Did you ever face any issues from any other races or your own? Or?
Nah, like even the Korean kids got used to me. Like even the Korean kids, like, oh, that's that Korean dude that hangs out with the Mexicans. You know what I mean? So, like, nah, nobody bothered me, man. And that's one thing I gotta say about like LA racial relations. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's something that the division is something that came later, that someone promoted. You know what I mean? But back in those days, man, no one judged you for your race. You know what I mean? Like, my black homies, Mexican homies never said anything. You know what I mean? We used to bag on each other, call me a Buddha head because that was the word back then. Hey, you Buddha head. But nah, man, that was the homies. There was no, and even like, I was 11 when I used to catch the bus all the way to Bell Surplus to get my khakis for $11. And back then it wasn't even King Boulevard. It was like Santa Barbara. Yeah, Santa Barbara and Vermont.
There's the 18th Street clique that started right there. Were they there back then?
Nah.
They weren't.
Nah, I don't think so. If they were, I don't know.
Well, you know what? They wasn't because they're called King Boulevard Gangsters.
Wow, no idea.
If it was Santa Barbara,
yeah,
that means they weren't there yet.
Yeah, they weren't there. But I'd be on the bus stops, man, like in the black neighborhood, and then I'd be like, waiting for the bus, and all these black kids would be like, what the fuck is this Korean dude or Asian dude doing that? But yo, man, nobody ever treated me badly. You know what I mean?
For the dime moves in the lokes. For the 6-4s on spokes. For the OGs that did a dime, came back around on parole. For the homegirls with the scrap game. Lil' homies that gang bang. From Pelican Bay to YA. Rearrange your mind frame. Yeah, I know what you've been through. Shit you had to go tend to. Your mama gave birth on the turf.
I was the founder. I created Conan Pocket in my mother's garage.
I had a lot of, lifting weights, and I was on swole. They started calling me Big Ned.